Good morning, everyone. Tim Vriend, many of you know me probably already, 7th year on Morapi, 7th year on stage with Morapi. Like Ruben mentioned, we're doing things a bit different, nice short talks, really like them. But this also posed me with quite a challenge because I don't know how many people were here last year, but as you probably remember, I'm not very good at keeping my presentation short. So let's see how this challenge will unfold. Timer's already started, I see. Another challenge, which I'm actually very excited about, is that Mo is joining me on stage. And you probably might recognize him already from previous Morapi presentations where I showed his face on the big screen, basically warming him up for this moment. Mo has been with us for over 6 years already as one of our senior field engineers, currently also acting team lead of the engineering department. And together we will give you a brief insight on where we stand with the Juniper migrations. So let's get started. Last year I mentioned in the presentation that we were expecting the first deliveries later in the year. Now this partially became true. Half of the delivery was done indeed in November last year, the other half was done a couple of weeks ago. And on top of that I also mentioned that we were about to start with the integration of these new switches into our systems, and tooling and the likings. And of course to train our engineers to work with these new systems. Now if we start the updates from there. So since we are migrating to a new vendor, like I said, it starts with training. Now the way we did this, we pretty much locked all our engineers up in a room for 10 days straight and pushed them through a bootcamp training. And once we opened the door again, I'm happy to say that they all came out on their own feet and they were all a lot wiser than when they went in. Next to that, we arranged for some additional hardware training, mostly for the field engineers, just to see how these things look like in real life, touch them and know what modules go where. And also we arranged for some all-access training passes, just so the engineers themselves, they can train themselves to become masters in these systems with pretty much any Juniper training available. If we then look at the integration part, like I said, new systems need to be integrated, and tooling systems that we have running, automation, database structures, all of these things need to be adjusted. But also things like our statistics. The collection of statistics for the Junipers are a bit different than Extremes, and we do want to keep showing you those nice little graphs on the website and your portals. So we need to make some changes there as well. And there's a lot more to it that needs to be changed, but we're on the time schedule, so let's keep it short. Another thing with new vendors is also that you need to start creating and aligning together about new processes, things like the ordering process, support processes, and you name it. Now, and all of this took a lot more time than I originally thought it would, and therefore the planning was pretty much delayed already right away compared to what I announced to you last year. So my apologies for that part. But because we didn't want to delay even further, we decided to, in parallel, while we were doing the integration part, to start already with the preparations of the first migration at Equinix AM5. Now, and these preparations always start with, of course, documentation. Basically telling us step by step what we need to do, how to do it, how to connect everything up, and what materials we need. Now, and pretty much right away after we got a list of materials, we ran into some delays. They didn't delay the migration itself, but they were a bit slower than we thought, because the materials that we used to get quite fast, it took a bit longer, a couple of days longer to deliver. On top of that, with these Junipers, we get some new technology available, like the 400 gigabit, the new optic types, the QSFP 2x100 gig LR4, and the 4x100 gig LR1. All these abbreviations. The LR1s, by the way, will be discussed a bit further by Erik later on. But yeah, these new optic types, of course, needed some testing to make sure that interoperability between the optics and the switches was good. But also because they're somewhat newer, the delivery times, again, took a bit longer. Now, nothing extreme there, nothing that pushed us back in our planning even further. So, another challenge, or actually a funny surprise, I would say, a lesson learned. When we got the boxes delivered, the Junipers delivered, we pretty much expected they would be connected with power cables like C19 and C20. Pretty standard connector, but instead they came with these Anderson cables, and well, we've never heard about them. And when we reached out to the data centers, apparently they've never heard about them. So we needed to put some additional effort in and some additional teamwork together with the data center to make sure that we can power up the switches once we got to the migration. But that was a nice lesson learned for the future. And on top of that, the size of the box. Of course, we did our homework with dimensions and those kind of things to make sure these things fit in the racks that we have in place. But apparently there's still an additional handle on the back sticking out, and also the QSF PDD optics are a bit bigger than the standard optics, so the box became a bit bigger than we anticipated, and that means that not for this first migration, but for future migrations, we might need to replace our racks for deeper racks. Now, the last two, the power and rack space, we're already in touch actually with the data centers for future migrations to make sure this gets settled before we actually start migration, just to make sure we don't get delays there. A somewhat bigger challenge, surprise. Hey, it doesn't go on. Sorry for. There we go. So there it is. A somewhat bigger surprise came actually when so the software running on these boxes. We asked Juniper to propose us with a version which to use, and what they did basically, they came back with the newest version at that moment and a list of known bugs that were known for this software. And this list was mostly consisted of bugs that would not hit us at all in production because it just didn't apply to us. But there was also this list of very unlikely bugs. Now, very unlikely doesn't seem very extreme, but there were quite a lot of them on the list. So we figured it would be very likely that one of these unlikely bugs would hit us. And therefore we decided to do some additional research, which did cost a lot of time or extra time. And in the end, we decided to take the newer version, which will be released any moment now, if it wasn't released, looking at Stavros since he's in contact with them, which actually should solve all these unlikely bugs. So yeah, this means that if you take everything together, the integration, the preparation, we were delayed, and we basically didn't migrate yet. That would mean that my presentation would be very short, and we would actually have time left. And we cannot have that, of course. So for this reason, and also because it became sort of a tradition for us to take you a little bit on these journeys through how we do these kind of migrations or projects, I asked Mohamed to prepare a couple of slides to show you high level how these things are done. And I'll be back with you, to you in a minute with the planning. Well, up to you.
Good morning, everyone. Test. There I am. Not yet. Nope. Hello. Hello. Test. Yes, there I am. Good morning, everyone. As Tim already told you, my name is Mohamed, and I will take you into a quick overview of how one of these migrations will be done. On the screen, you can see a simple version of how one of these installations is done at one of our POP locations. In standard operations, customers are connected to the PXE, and from the PXE, they are connected to both switches. The first thing that we need to do before we can migrate is to make sure all traffic is removed from the switch that we want to migrate. That is simply done by switching all the customers via the PXE to the other switch. Once this is done, we can remove the big old full rack switch and all the cables, of course. We will then install the patch panels, which I will mention later in my presentation. Last but not least, everything will be cabled, labeled, and we will do a couple of tests before we can start to move the customers back. Our NOC will then start configure all the customer ports and the backbone ports, and slowly move all the customers to the switch that we just installed. We will then let this new setup run for a couple of days to test the stability of it, and the engineers will be. In the meantime, the engineers will ship back the old materials and bring back the new materials that we need for the second part of the migration. Once the stability is confirmed, we can right away removing the other switch, since all the customers are already swapped to the newly installed switch. Basically, we will repeat the same steps as we did in the first part of the migration. Yeah, after confirming everything works everything works as expected, NOC will reconfigure all those ports and slowly swap all the customers to the second new switch and leave this running for a bit. After confirming everything is stable there as well, all customer connections will get load balanced again, and everything is back to the normal operations. So, about those patch panels, most of the patch panels are connected with MTP to LC breakout cables, which is not ideal for us. We often need to move connections on the switch itself, but also a lot of optics are not LC anymore, which makes it very messy to attach cables and working with adapters. So we decided to put the patch panel in between. So from the PXC to the back side of the patch panel, and from in the front of the patch panel, we do simple patches to the switch itself. The first migration on our list is Aconex AM5, where we have a double set of the old MLX32s, which uses about 52 kilowatts of power. And in the new setup, we will bring it back to 2 newer Juniper switches, which will use about 15 kilowatts of power. That's a power saving of around 70%. And on top of this, everything will look a lot nicer again. And we expect the first migration to take about 4 to 5 weeks. But after we will get some experience, we will do definitely much faster than the 4 to 5 weeks. Back to Tim for the planning.
Now my turn to, I worked right away again. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was Mo's very first presentation. So I would like to ask you for an extra hand of applause. He definitely did better than I do most of the time. So, yeah, if we look at the planning, let's skip the slide again then. Hoppakee. So we started Aconex AM5, like Mo mentioned. Oh, I can actually talk very slow. I see I still have 3.5 minutes. Yeah, so Aconex AM5 is first on the planning. Because it's the first, it's a lot of switches. It's really a massive amount of cables. We decided to take this one really slow, a couple of weeks, 5 to 6 weeks. We gave each other the green light pretty much recently to start on the 12th of June, a week and a half from now. Actually, it was spoiled by Ruben already. And we expect to be done around mid-July, end of July. After that, we'll take a little break, summer holidays and everything, and then we'll come back and start right away with our first core node, the one at Digital Realty at Science Park. And then we can also start with implementing the 400 gigabit in our backbones, because then can get some familiarity with those. Now after that we go again to a somewhat bigger one, and that's the super site, also at Science Park across the street with NICF and Interaction Science Park. Funny thing here is last year I mentioned that we would actually break those two apart. I even made you say, because we would break up the happy marriage. We didn't. We mediated a bit. We're going to keep them together and keep the power saving as we had it so far, because sustainability, it's important. So we decided to keep those two together, but again, it's a big site, divided over 2 locations, a lot of cabling in between, so we will take this one also a little bit slower. After that one, still this year, hopefully, we will start, go back across again to Digital Realty, this time the customer-facing switches instead of the core. And this is pretty much a standard installation, like many of the sites are, and therefore we decided that that would be the one where we test our templates. And once those are perfect and smooth, we will speed things up a lot after that, if deliveries can keep up, of course. So yeah, that's the planning for this year. For next year, I'll update you, of course, next year, or maybe Mohamed can do it next year. And that's it. Any questions? No? Then thank you very much.